Chapter 21. Saint Kadiyun. Seeing how close he was to hitting his target, Leung felt a tiny amount of regret. However, he immediately went back into motion and flung a kick at Gian Chen. In a flash, 10 moves had passed without Gian Chen retaliating, and every single move from Leung had been easily dodged. But to everyone else that was watching, Jian Chen had been narrowly dodging each move by the skin of his teeth, causing everyone watching, including Changyang H, to break out in cold sweat as they watched in anxiety. Leung's attacks were fairly fast and furious, but none of the 10 moves he had lashed out with even touched Jian Chen's clothes. Having not landed a single blow, Leung was angry beyond belie. Finally lifting a fist to block Leung's fist, Jian Chen spoke, "10 moves have passed. It's my turn." Without waiting for a response, he aimed a kick at Leung. The speed in which his leg was moving was extremely fast. There wasn't even enough time for Leung to dodge. By the time he tried to move his hand up to block, Jian Chen's leg had already smashed against Leung's chest. Dung! Dang! Dang! The force of Jian Chen's leg caused Leung to stumble backwards. As he steadied himself, Leung gave Jian Chen a dumbstruck look. Although Jian Chen was only at the 8th Saint Force layer, Jian Chen's strength had far surpassed his expectations. It wasn't something Leung would be able to endure. In the last fight during the competition, Leung had never exchanged blows with Jian Chen, so he never understood the true extent of Jian Chen's strength. It was not until this fight that Leung realized that Jian Chen was stronger than he looked. In fact, based on the strength of the kick just now, Leung was starting to doubt that Jian Chen was only at the 8th Saint Force layer. Perhaps Jian Chen also wanted to end this battle quickly, because he didn't give Leung time to even gasp before he quickly slammed his fist into Leung's nose. Leung's face hardened as he stood back up. His entire body tried to stand against Jian Chen's fist before he tried to smash his fist against Jian Chen's head. Jian Chen let out a cold laugh before blocking the fist with his own hand. Grabbing onto Leung's shoulder with his other hand, he got into a horse stance and grabbed onto him with his right arm. Grabbing tightly, he exerted some force and sent Leung flying away. In his previous life, Jian Chen had learned wrestling techniques from the Mongols, so he was fairly proficient at it. He had used it many times and gained experience in it so much that it was ingrained into his memory. Jian Chen learned many different skills other than just swordplay and was fairly proficient at every single thing he put his mind towards. Leung's body was almost like a feather as he flew through the air. Thanks to Jian Chen, he flew 4 to 5 meters into the air before finally falling back down to the arena. Phew! He saw Jian Chen to be weak, but somehow Jian Chen had managed to accomplish such a feat with his delicate-looking figure. Likewise, the audience around the arena let out gasps of shock as they started to reevaluate their opinions about Jian Chen. Seeing the two fight it out like this made it so that no one would ever dare to underestimate Jian Chen in the future. The faces of Kadiyun and Kadi both gradually turned quite ugly. The situation was far beyond what they had expected it to be. "Heng, Changyang H, you actually are a slightly skilled," Kadiyun said in a low voice, while angrily gritting his teeth. Leung stood back up pathetically on the ring with a cloudy-looking face. He looked at Jian Chen's eyes with a gaze filled with poison. "Ah!" Leung roared, focusing all his power of the 9th level of Saint Force in the center of his 2 palms. He quickly rushed towards Jian Chen with both his arms pressing towards Jian Chen's chest and attacked. Jian Chen sneered, and as he condensed all his Saint Force onto his palms as well, he suddenly threw his own hands towards Leung's, resulting in a collision between both pairs of hands. Peng! As the sound came echoing out, Jian Chen and Leung were stuck in a deadlock. Their fists had slammed so hard against each other, a mini shockwave pushed both of them backwards. Jian Chen didn't stop there. His legs began to blur as he skillfully maneuvered to counter the shock. Looking at the rapidly retreating Leung, Jian Chen immediately dashed forward and leapt up from the ground, both of his legs kicking out at Leung. Before Leung could regain his footing, he was unable to block the attack. As he was kicked in the stomach by Jian Chen, Leung was sent flying once more. Hitting the ground, Leung's face went white from the pain as he began to spit out some blood. He had started to take in heavy amounts of damage. "Younger brother! Older brother!" Kadiyun and Kadi ran up to Kadi Liang's side on the ground. Picking him up, they grimaced and looked at him with concern as they saw the small trickle of blood from the corner of Kadi Liang's mouth. "Younger brother, are you okay?" Kadiyun asked. His face was relatively unsightly to look at, although the situation was different from last time, since Kadi Liang had been careless during the first match with Gian Chen. However, this second time was different. This time, Kadi Liang was fighting with Jian Chen using all of his strength, which was stronger than 80% of the other 9th Saint Force Layer students. "Older brother, how are you feeling? Are you seriously hurt?" Kadi asked with a voice full of concern. Kadi Liang was helped to his feet by his 2 siblings. Lightly shaking his head, he said, "Eldest brother, 3rd sister, I'll be fine. I've only suffered from minor injuries." But even as he said that, his 2 siblings could detect a small tinge of weakness in his voice. Looking at Kadi Liang's pale face, Kadiyun grew angry. Raising his head to look at the elevated Gian Chen, he growled, "3rd sister, you take care of 2nd brother. I'll go teach that arrogant brat a lesson." Leaving his siblings, he walked up into the arena to confront him. "Eldest brother, you shouldn't. Eldest brother, you can't." Kadi Liang and Kadi tried to block his path, but unfortunately, they didn't reach him in time. The 2 siblings let out a sigh. No matter if Kadiyun won or lost now, the Kadi clan would lose some prestige within the academy. This was originally a fair battle, so if they had lost, then they wouldn't have felt any negative side effects other than losing some face. But now that Kadiyun was going to fight, the whole situation was different. If news about a freshman immediately being bullied by some seniors straight after entering the academy was spread throughout the entire academy, then the 3 siblings would be mocked and ridiculed by the whole academy. Jian Chen stared at Kadiyun as he leapt up onto the stage and sneered, "Are you here to avenge your brother? Younger brother! Older brother!" Kadiyun and Kadi ran up to Kadi Liang's side on the ground. Picking him up, they grimaced and looked at him with concern as they saw the small trickle of blood from the corner of Kadi Liang's mouth. "Younger brother, are you okay?" Kadiyun asked. His face was relatively unsightly to look at, although the situation was different from last time, since Kadi Liang had been careless during the first match with Jian Chen. However, this second time was different. This time, Kadi Liang was fighting with Jian Chen using all of his strength, which was stronger than 80% of the other 9th Saint Force Layer students. "Older brother, how are you feeling? Are you seriously hurt?" Kadi asked with a voice full of concern. Kadi Liang was helped to his feet by his 2 siblings. Lightly shaking his head, he said, "Eldest brother, 3rd sister, I'll be fine. I've only suffered from minor injuries." But even as he said that, his 2 siblings could detect a small tinge of weakness in his voice. Looking at Kadi Liang's pale face, Kadiyun grew angry. Raising his head to look at the elevated Jian Chen, he growled, "3rd sister, you take care of 2nd brother. I'll go teach that arrogant brat a lesson." Leaving his siblings, he walked up into the arena to confront him. "Eldest brother, you shouldn't. Eldest brother, you can't." Kadi Liang and Kadi tried to block his path, but unfortunately, they didn't reach him in time. The 2 siblings let out a sigh. No matter if Kadiyun won or lost now, the Kadi clan would lose some prestige within the academy. This was originally a fair battle, so if they had lost, then they wouldn't have felt any negative side effects, other than losing some face. But now that Kadiyun was going to fight, the whole situation was different. If news about a freshman immediately being bullied by some seniors straight after entering the academy was spread throughout the entire academy, then the 3 siblings would be mocked and ridiculed by the whole academy. Jian Chen stared at Kadiyun as he leapt up onto the stage and sneered, "Are you here to avenge your brother?" Angrily glaring at Jian Chen, he said, "Changyang H, you really are strong. However, you've injured my brother. Therefore, I won't let you leave this place unharmed." The people around the stage all creased their foreheads as they listened to him. Their opinions about Kadiyun had now changed. "Kadiyun, what is the meaning of this? Do you plan to bully the Changyang clan until no one remains?" A deep voice called out as another person walked onto the arena. Turning around, Jian Chen felt relieved to see it was his older brother, Changyang H. Changyang H stared at Kadiyun intensely. Kadiyun, if you want to fight, then you'll have to fight me first. Gian Chen felt a wave of warmth encompass his body as he listened to his brother back him up. Big brother, you should head back down. I can handle this myself. Changyang H shook his head in response to him. No can do, fourth brother. It should be you that should head down. Kadiyun's strength has long since reached the peak of the Saint Force level. You are no match for him, so let your big brother help you. After hesitating a bit from these words, Gian Chen nodded. Then, big brother, please be careful. Saying this, Jian Chen walked off the arena. Kadiyun sneered in disdain as he watched Jian Chen exit the arena. Changyang H, you're just asking for trouble, so don't blame me for anything that happens. You're saying this far too early. Whoever the winner is and whoever the loser is isn't certain yet, Changyang H replied. He and Kadiyun had long since reached the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer, so if Kadiyun didn't condense his Saint Force into a Saint weapon, then their strengths would be equal. Kadiyun let loose a ridiculing expression as he looked at the disdain on Changyang H's face. Lifting his right arm, a large golden-colored stream of energy started to focus onto his right arm and condensed into a great golden sword. The golden sword was quite large and measured around 5 feet long and a single palm spread wide. Judging from the length of the handle, the sword was meant to be held with both hands. Looking at Kadiyun grab the sword with both hands, Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together in concern. He had read up on saint weapons back in the Changyang mansion. He could easily see that this was Kadiyun's saint weapon, and that this was also the first saint weapon that Gian Chen had ever seen since he first arrived in this new world. He had long since understood that a saint weapon was the condensed version of one's saint force, but seeing this with his own eyes, Gian Chen couldn't help but feel amazed. To think that the saint force could be condensed in such a way, it felt almost like a fantasy. This made Gian Chen feel extremely excited. The moment the golden two-hand sword appeared, everyone cried out in surprise and admiration. A saint weapon, he really did condense one! So he already broke through into the saint level. Kadiyun became a saint. Changyang H will be in trouble now. The distance between the peak of the 10th layer to sainthood wasn't that far, but it was nonetheless very difficult to cross over. Within the Kargath Academy, the majority of the seniors had all reached the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer, but were unable to condense their Saint Force into Saint weapons. If one didn't have the talent that surpassed a regular person's, then it would be extremely difficult for him/her to make a breakthrough. Within the Tianyuan continent, it was not rare to see many practitioners to be stuck at the 10th layer until the end of their lives without being able to become a saint. From this one could see that successfully becoming a saint was a truly difficult achievement. Also, once one broke through to becoming a saint, his/her strength would be increased by a large amount. A saint weapon wasn't one's only weapon. One could use his/her emotions to directly fuel his/her abilities in order to use attacks that far surpassed one's original strength. Looking at Kadiyun's golden sword, Changyang H's face became extremely unsightly. Now that Kadiyun possessed a saint weapon, his strength could overturn the heavens. A person at the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer definitely wouldn't be a match for him. Big Brother really did condense a saint weapon. Below the arena, Kadi was pleasantly surprised as she watched Kadiyun wave his saint weapon around. Kadi Leung had an envious look on his face as he stared at the saint weapon, but he too was pleasantly surprised. Both siblings had not realized that their eldest sibling had reached the saint level until this moment. Holding the saint weapon, Kadiyun's confidence in himself was boosted to unprecedented levels. As Changyang H's face grew darker and darker, Kadiyun's face became even haughtier. The pleasure Kadiyun felt in his heart was indescribable. Ha 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 ha, Changyang H, are you afraid now? If you kneel down and kowtow to the ground 3 times and call me your elder, then I'll spare you. If you don't, then, you'll know what the end result will be." Kadiyun laughed crazily, his tone savage. Changyang Hu's face ashened as he listened to Kadiyun's demands. Snarling, he answered, "Dream on, Kadiyun. Even if you're a saint now, I, Changyang Hu, will never be afraid of you." Kadiyun looked at Changyang Hu arrogantly and casually said, "Changyang Hu, what will you use to fight me with then?" Changyang Hu angrily glared at Kadiyun, fury blazing in his eyes. "Changyang Hu, your sword!" At that moment, a sword came flying out from the audience below the arena. Changyang Hu grabbed the iron sword while settling into a stance. The sword was not light at all and was of a fairly long size. The silver-white sword sparkled in the light in all 4 directions, and aside from the color, there were few differences between Kadiyun's sword and Changyang Hu's sword. Chapter 22. Battling Kadiyun. With his sword in hand, Changyang Hu's courage was bolstered, despite knowing that his opponent was a saint with a saint weapon. However, at least he had gained some more power too. "Changyang Hu, do you really think you stand a chance against me with a regular iron sword? Wishful thinking. Right now, I'll show you the power of a saint." Kadiyun quickly sped towards Changyang Hu after that while carrying his double sword, as if it wasn't heavy at all. He swung his sword at Changyang Hu so fast, the air whistled as the sword traveled through the air. Changyang Hu's attention was extremely concentrated on the Kadiyun's saint weapon. Quickly retreating before he could get hit, the sword narrowly missed him and only swiped at his clothes. A few strands of his clothes were sent flying through the air as the sword sliced away at the clothes. After becoming a saint, Kadiyun's strength became many times stronger than what it was previously, and couldn't be compared to Changyang Hu's strength, which was at the 10th Saint Force layer. With just the first blow, Changyang Hu knew how much danger he was in. Ha! Halfway through another strike, Kadiyun didn't hesitate at all mid-swing. As he advanced closer and closer to Changyang Hu, his entire body started to emit an extremely strong qi that imposed itself on Changyang Hu. Taking a swipe, Kadiyun tried to chop down Changyang Hu with his golden sword once more. Seeing how strong the great sword was, Changyang Hu could not parry the blow, as the iron sword in his hand would not be able to withstand the powerful force from the saint weapon. The great sword was extremely fast and was far beyond what Changyang Hu had expected. Feeling the great sword in close proximity with his head, Changyang Hu didn't hesitate at all to duck and roll away from it. At this moment, he was unable to cope with the fight's intensity. Bang! The moment after Changyang Hu rolled away, Kadiyun's sword embedded itself into the spot where Changyang Hu had once been standing at. The strong concentration of energy that made up the sword left a deep crack within the ground of the arena, while smaller cracks started to spread out in all 4 directions to at least a meter away from the original impact zone. Changyang Hu took the opportunity when Kadiyun was trying to recover from his strike to brandish and slash his sword at Kadiyun. "Humph!" Kadiyun snorted in disdain as he waved his hands. The saint weapon in his hands began to emit a magnificent light as it reappeared back into his hands and collided against Changyang Hu's iron sword. A loud and crisp sound echoed throughout the arena as the iron sword met the golden sword before it was sent flying backwards. The sword had been forced out of Changyang Hu's hands after the collision, causing Changyang Hu to be defenseless. Already his mouth was trickling blood as the sword had somehow managed to inflict damage to him. Immediately, Kadiyun's foot lashed out and smashed against Changyang Hu's chest. His strength was high enough that it was able to send a strong person, like Changyang Hu, flying backwards and off of the arena. As he flew off into the air, blood came spraying out of his mouth as his face grew pale from the shock. "Big brother!" Gian Chen cried out, his expression suddenly changing. He immediately dashed towards where Changyang H was and leapt into the air. While everyone was watching Changyang H being launched into the air in astonished stupors, Gian Chen had already moved into action. Right as Changyang H was about to hit the ground, Gian Chen came out from the side and caught him before impact. Care! On the ground, Changyang H started to cough violently, causing droplets of blood to splatter out of his mouth. A saint's strength was far stronger than someone who didn't reach the same level. This was true even for Changyang H, who was at the peak of the 10th layer. Thus, he had suffered from serious internal injuries. Big brother, are your injuries serious? Jian Chen tried to quell the anger within himself as he looked at his brother in concern. Changyang H shook his head in anger as he fixed his attention at the smug Kadiyun on the arena. I'll be fine. But I didn't think Kadiyun's strength would be this strong after reaching the saint level with a saint weapon. As of right now, your big brother is no longer a match for him, Changyang H growled, his anger not dissipating at all. I'm sorry, big brother. I was the one who got you involved. Looking at Changyang H's pale white face from his injuries, Gian Chen felt true guilt within his heart. Hearing these words, Changyang H turned around and looked at Gian Chen. He furrowed his brows and angrily replied, Fourth brother, what in the world are you saying? Do you not consider me your older brother? His face grew dark as he let out a helpless sigh. It's unfortunate. Your big brother is quite useless. Up until now, I still haven't been able to reach the saint level. Otherwise, Kadiyun definitely wouldn't have been a match for me. Changyang H's words shook Jian Chen's heart. Tilting his head up at Kadiyun, his eyes started to flash cold for a brief second before disappearing. The disdain in his eyes wouldn't dissipate, however, and he immediately said emotionlessly, Big brother, you should rest up for a second. I'll definitely get revenge for you. With that said, Jian Chen started to move towards the arena. Changyang H's face immediately changed after hearing that, and he pulled at Jian Chen. Absolutely not. Fourth brother, you are not Kadiyun's opponent. Don't go. Jian Chen gave an apologetic smile and said, Big brother, please believe in me. His face exuded a fierce conviction, and he threw off Changyang H's grasp on him, leaping onto the arena. Heavens! What is he planning? It looks like he wants to challenge Kadiyun. My God, he's gone mad. He's only at the 8th Saint Force layer. To think that he wants to challenge a saint like Kadiyun, he's only asking for trouble here. As Gian Chen leapt onto the arena, the audience surrounding them cried out in alarm. No one believed that Gian Chen would be an appropriate opponent for a saint like Kadiyun. He really is a hothead. Kadiyun is a saint who just beat a person who was at the peak of the 10th layer. How would he win against someone like that? Under the arena, the girl who sat next to Gian Chen in the library muttered as she watched him join the arena. Her entire face was filled with concern. Kadiyun watched Gian Chen leap up with a blank look, but he quickly regained his wits and snorted with laughter. What's wrong, Changyang Xiangtian? Do you really think you can fight against me? Kadiyun never thought Jian Chen to be a worthy opponent. After all, he was a powerful saint already. Jian Chen responded coldly. Is it wrong to think that I can? Stunned, Kadiyun started to laugh evilly as he smiled at Jian Chen. Of course, it's definitely okay. Right now, Kadiyun was thinking about the best way to humiliate Jian Chen, since Jian Chen had humiliated his pretty younger sister, Kadi, during the freshman martial arts competition for everyone to see. This had earned hatred from both Kadiyun and Kadi Liang, for they both loved their sister dearly. Jian Chen was in no rush, as he walked over to where Changyang H's sword was. As he weighed the sword on his hands, Jian Chen slightly frowned. The sword didn't weigh past 100 pounds, but it was close enough to that weight. If it weren't for the fact that Gian Chen was at the 8th Saint Force layer, then he wouldn't be able to lift the sword at all to use it. In his previous life, Gian Chen would frequently use a sword that had a blade 2 finger widths wide. With that sword, he had brought his swordplay to a level that he had been famous for. With this two-hand sword, however, Gian Chen felt like one of his arms was bound behind his back since it was very heavy. He would not be able to use the full extent of his powers, and just swinging the sword with ease would demand a large amount of his energy. It was a shame that with the exception of this sword, there was no other sword around. With a small amount of hesitation, Jian Chen decided to forego the giant sword and fight against Kadiyun barehanded. This way, he would at least have the advantage in speed and nimbleness. Arriving at the center of the arena, Jian Chen looked at Kadiyun with an impassive face as he stretched his fists. "You make the first move. I'll fight against you barehanded." Kadiyun's face narrowed. Clearly, Jian Chen was looking down on him by fighting barehanded. For an 8th Saint Force layer practitioner to fight against a saint without any weapon while the saint had a saint weapon was a display of great humiliation towards the saint. Kadiyun's eye grew cold as he sneered, "Changyang H, you are far too arrogant." The golden sword in his hand began to disappear slowly into the air. "Let it be said that I didn't bully you. Come, I'll fight you without a weapon as well." Hearing this, Jian Chen let loose a strange smile. Without wasting words, he dashed towards Kadiyun and used his Saint Force to amplify his strength as his fist flew at Kadiyun's head, cutting a sharp whistle through the air. Kadiyun looked at the first with a bored expression before returning the blow with his own fist. The two fists collided as a golden light flowed out from Kadiyun's fist. Only those who reached sainthood would be able to materialize their Saint Force like this. The moment when the two fists collided against each other, Jian Chen's fist suddenly spread out to become an open palm after the initial contact was made. His hand absorbed the impact so that the blow became as soft as a sponge as he used Taiji Quan to force Kadiyun's fist to overextend harmlessly past himself. Kadiyun's arm was forced upwards in a weird position as Jian Chen twisted it. In a flash, the strength behind Kadiyun's fist dissipated away as Jian Chen extended his other hand to chop down onto the joint of Kadiyun's arm. Ka-cha! The sound of a bone breaking could be heard as Jian Chen dislocated Kadiyun's arm with an arm chop. Kadiyun let out a muffled and pained cry as the pain in his arm registered within his brain, causing his face to go deathly white. Right after his hand had dislocated Kadiyun's arm, Jian Chen did not stop moving. Both of his arms grabbed onto the entire arm and gave it a mighty twist. Ah! By this point, Kadiyun couldn't refrain from screaming anymore. Releasing a squeal of pain reminiscent of a wild pig, he felt as if his entire arm had been broken off. Ever since he was small, he had never suffered pain to an extent like this, and so in such a short amount of time his face was drained of color, as his entire forehead started to drip with sweat. Hearing such a desolate yet miserable shriek, the people who had originally been chattering away during the match went deathly silent. Everyone watched Jian Chen with amazement as they watched the inconceivable happen. This situation was the exact opposite of what everyone was expecting to see. Since when did fourth brother become this amazing? Just looking at this, Kadiyun will definitely suffer a lot by Changyang H hand. However, even if Kadiyun doesn't use his saint weapon, he's still a saint. His strength is definitely still greater than mine. Changyang H muttered to himself as he watched the match with a dumbstruck expression.